Hi, welcome everybody. This is the planning board meeting for Wednesday, April 9th. We have the first thing on the agenda is with the Black Island Housing Board. Discuss strategies for the affordable and obtainable housing, prioritize and identify feasible, favorable to implementation in short term, provide feedback to Weston and Sampson. And by the way, for those who are listening, Weston and Sampson were the ones that received the grant to help us prioritize how best to open up more affordable and obtainable housing. Okay. Now, do we have anybody from Weston and Sampson here today to go through this with us?
We don't, we just,
Okay,
we're gonna work through the document that I handed out, the potential zoning updates,
okay, then.
so that you can give them, we can give them some
Give
feedback.
okay. I've taken, you all got copies of this? Looks like that. Good. You've seen this before, but this time.
I've got it. All this is I just pulled out the action items from, potential action items from the original document. Yeah, so you didn't have to go through the entire document.
So let me go through it. I will, we can look at these one by one. I think there's a total of about 8 or 9 of these possible things. And I certainly hope Chris and Cindy will chime in on things that you feel that we ought to be asking the Weston and Sampson to do more research for us. We've got a couple of ideas we've talked about in the past. For example, how to finance it, what kind of tax incentives could be discussed, what kind of zoning changes might be helpful. So let's start with the first item that was on the list is allow for moderately more dense housing types defined as allowable uses in more zoning districts in New Shoreham with performance standards. So how do you feel?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I don't think that it addresses the legal affordable housing issue, because we already allow for close to 400% increase in density. But I guess that's my comment.
Yeah, as I said, we've already done a lot of this. So this, as far as I'm concerned, this would not be one of my high priorities for them to research, since we have already eased up considerably on ADUs as far as zoning goes.
I agree. I think you have some, I think this is if you were to create housing, not necessarily the attainable or affordable.
Yeah,
Right.
I think some of the others are.
more will probably, in my opinion, are more important. Cindy, how do you feel?
I'm in agreement. I just was wondering when they say moderately more dense housing types. Was that alluding to multifamily structures? I wasn't exactly sure.
It is, yes,
Multifamily structures, which
Correct.
are allowed in
several zones.
several zones already.
Right.
So basically,
Is it design?
And this is just the zone, like these are, would be proposed zoning changes, and it might be for the housing board, but it's probably for just anyone could do it. So, depending on which ones you choose.
okay. So
Peter, if you, I don't necessarily look at the screen, so if you want to.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I was just waiting for a time to butt in. I have a question for Karen, maybe for Jen. Multifamily in the commercial zone is a special use permit. Does that go to the zoning board or the planning board?
But it's gonna depend. If it's just a straight special use permit, it would go to the zoning board. If for some reason it was combined with some other permitting approval, it would go to planning under UDR.
So is it, and this might be related to the DPR ordinance that we're looking at now, but currently is multifamily development plan review? Probably used to be before, 2 years ago.
I think it's a special use permit right now. And they
No
would also,
development plan review.
right now, be a special use permit and a development plan review.
And if
It
the
is-
way we have been doing it, but we don't see many projects like that.
A lot of municipalities are moving multifamily from special use permit to by right. So I guess related to this and what Weston Sampson is asking is part of this might be moving multifamily attached in the commercial zones from special use permit to by right. And I'm wondering if that's something that the town is interested in.
Yes. I think so.
Peter, they usually, this board would like to have some oversight and review.
Right, but that could be DPR or land development project. It doesn't need to be a special use permit.
Okay.
So maybe some feedback to Weston and Sampson on this particular item is that they could look at making multifamily attached permitted by right in the commercial zones instead of a special use permit.
No,
I think there are other things I'd rather spend my time on than that, to
Okay,
tell you the truth.
all right, thank you.
Good. Please continue to chime in though as we go through this, because you've got good ideas. Okay, second. Revised limit on expansion to just existing structure, limit to only 1 or 2 bedroom units, requirement to include elderly units.
and this is specifically to the plan development zone, section 319. You have had two projects under the PDs. I think you could pass on this one for right now and circle back to it. After you go through the other, unless you want to talk about it, just,
I wasn't clear on what.
yeah, I don't know if it would create as much housing as some of the other suggestion.
Yep.
But it's up to
We
you.
can put a question mark by this one and come back. And if we need to, let's see, let's take a look at some of the others. Cindy, any comments on this one before I leave it? Okay. All right, third one. Explore allowing for the smaller subdivision of existing lots, providing that there is affordability restrictions recorded.
I think that's already in place.
It is for the housing board, so if it. This is really speaking to like if it's a private homeowner that would like to sell a smaller portion of their lot to.
Yeah, that's in place too.
Not necessarily.
We can, oh, I remember.
It is, for the housing board, the increase in density is substantial, but for other entities, it is not.
Okay.
Is this something that you guys would want to pursue? Chris, is your hand up? I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
I know.
you're, I'm gonna either move the podium or move your body, whichever's easier. Fine, thank you.
Chris Warfel, Housing Board. When you say it's for the Housing Board, it's if this is Housing Board if they are developing a project, Ms. Brady Brown?
I'm saying if the housing, section 405 in the
Yeah.
zoning ordinance, really, it speaks to like all of the different options that the housing board has to create housing.
Okay.
So everything is restricted. And you can have you have greater density and more flexibility than a private homeowner would.
I think the Block Island Housing Initiative, they do, historically in their short tenure, smaller projects than the Housing Board is attempting to do. And my personal feeling when the board has not really discussed this as a formal item is that if it is going to be able to develop more affordable housing outside of the Housing Board, I would think the Housing Board would be all for it. So that's my personal opinion. We haven't discussed that though.
And in the past, when the housing board or BED, Mary Jane Balzer came
Yeah.
before the council and the planning board to amend the ordinance, it passed to create greater density or move zones or several situations.
This one, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Again, just for clarity in my mind,
Can you come to?
Listen, Alex. Number 3 and number 4, to me seem kind of conceptually yoked. So I would love to hear.
Yeah, let's just leave it on.
Sorry.
there. Yep, that's fine. We'll just
So,
leave it on while we're talking.
3 and 4 seem conceptually yoked to me, and I would love to hear from the board what your thoughts are. We do have through 405, the ability to have pretty small lots. Remember Cherry Hill Lane that we just did? I believe the lots were about 10,000 square feet. And that was a planned development, and we were allowed to subdivide, well, create lots, individual lots of about 10,000 square feet. So I think for affordable housing, we're kind of in there. But if we're talking, if this is talking about the island in general and other individual private homeowners, the concept is, can they subdivide and create a substandard lot as long as that is going to be deed restricted? So I'd love to hear how you think about that. And then that flows into the whole condo
Yeah.
thing, which is a kind of a subset of concept.
For me personally, this idea is one of the more interesting ones, because of the ability for someone who wants to put an ADU on their property, perhaps they can then work with the person that they're selling it for them to finance the building of it. That aspect of this is really interesting to me. Again, with deed restricted, I know we've talked about
Yeah, it'd have to be
long-term
deed
leases.
restricted.
I don't know exactly what the model is, and so I would be very interested in hearing what Weston and Sampson was able to find about this, or working on this in a small group with other people who are interested in it.
Can I be the devil's advocate for a minute?
Sure.
Not that I like that role. What is to stop a property owner who has a low income, but is house poor, let's say, she or he owns the house. She then builds the ADU. It's deed restricted, but because her or his income is low enough, this person can then move into that ADU and rent out the bigger house.
That's not on the books right now. I mean, that's not part of our ordinance. You're supposed to be able to rent the ADU, so and it isn't an income. An ADU isn't based on income. It's just the year round.
Okay.
In this model, you'd be selling.
Right, so the subdivision, you'd sell it.
Yes.
Okay.
And
say you had-
the way I would envision it is that if you were able to sell a substandard lot, the dwelling on that substandard lot would be deed restricted to have to be year-round housing. In my first flush at looking.
With the housing board involved in that, because they're
Sure.
familiar with like all of the restrictions
Yeah.
that they would want to see on that property. Troy Reynolds, they did something similar years ago. Do you remember that, Joe? I don't, it was, I think it was
Chris?
early 90s, but it would allow, say, a homeowner would like to sell the small lot to one of their children or a friend or whomever, and then they could get the mortgage because they would own the land. They'd own the lot.
That's one of the reasons I would.
Right now, you-
Condos, I want to talk about rentals.
Right now, excuse me, Marty,
Go
right
ahead.
now, they would own the lot as well. They
Yeah.
wouldn't just sort of lease the land underneath their house, the ADU.
Correct, but you
Okay.
could put, I mean, you could ask Weston and Sampson to model it after the criteria that you have in the ADU, whether it's a max of 25 feet, so it looks similar to an ADU, but it could be sold.
The situation of somebody moving into what should have been the accessory
Mhm,
513.
mhm.
We talked about this when we were developing some of the various scenarios and ordinances. And, I definitely was against this. And then after a few months ago, I was saying, wait a minute, what if somebody does that, but their house, which they no longer need because, they undergrown it, is set aside specifically for year-round qualified year-round residents. So in this case, of the two units, one is still going to be occupied by qualifying 513 type of person or persons. I said, well, that's not really a problem then, as long as it's done that way. So I don't know if we actually have formally discussed this concept, but I've changed my mind. And that I think if someone does move into what was the 513 and restricts their living unit, the former living unit to a year-round qualified family or person, then I don't really have that much of a problem with it.
I agree with what Chris
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
said.
so I
I
think
think
what
as
we're
long-
saying is that this should be a yes, something that we would want the Weston and Sampson to look further on and give us information, okay?
Well, their next step would be to put it into a draft ordinance. So you would just, maybe we can circle back to this one and you could give them some feedback. Would you want to see, would you like to see a height restriction or size? Or just take those standards out of the 513 and apply it? Or does it not matter?
No,
so-
it matters.
I mean,
Yeah, I think it matters. I'm just not quite sure what is the very best way to do it.
Yeah.
If I were talking off the cuff of my, I would say probably take the same standards that we use for the 513s. Because that's easy, but there may be something else we want to restrict. We will have another chance to look at this once they do a draft for us, right?
correct. So you
Yeah.
would want to think about how, like, your absolutes for the size of the lot. I mean, in the residential A zone, is it 10,000 square feet? Is it 5 in RB and the other zones, or? I
And
mean, if-
how many of
many-
these lots can you
Yes.
make from your property?
I think
You
there has
know.
to be in fairness to the
That's a good
neighbors, I
point,
think there
yeah.
has to be a,
Yeah, because if you have,
cutoff.
if you have like a 10-acre parcel
Yeah.
and you carve out your 3 acres and then the rest of it, are you allowed to just put as many ADUs as you know, I
No,
don't
I think
feel that way,
right-
but I
right
think
now, I
there
believe
needs to
we're
be some
restricted
kind
into
of,
3, if I recall correctly.
yeah, so do we restrict it the way that,
I would say probably
is
restrict
in-
it to 1, just, I mean, for now, and
Yes.
see how this, if it
yeah,
See
so
how it
one,
works.
is there
works,
one
and then you could go
ADU
back and
per-
if it's successful, you could
Yeah.
allow.
I just wonder,
well,
Gail brought this up when Weston and Sampson was first presenting this, that I think Chris referenced when we were working on the expedited approval process, how much it helped to have kind of a working group on this. And I just wonder if people are potentially interested in pursuing that as a strategy for fleshing out these ideas a bit more. Either with Weston and Sampson or to then provide Weston and Sampson with our thoughts on it. I don't know how people feel about that. though.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier today. It's a good idea.
I like
Well
the idea.
before.
I mean, you only
Yeah,
have
that's
4
good,
members right
yeah.
now, so maybe
Right,
it's
right.
kind
No, I
of
know, but
talking
it's
through
just,
some of
no.
those.
But to have a special time to do that, just
Right.
in our sessions or. to
Yeah, someone,
hash
you know.
through
I think if
Some of the
two
standards.
people wanted to come in and we could Zoom, like set up a Zoom meeting with
Yeah.
Yeah,
Weston and Sampson and kind of, and talk it through.
yeah.
And a couple of members of housing board potential, you know.
Well,
just so
if,
people can
yeah,
look
you
at it.
typically a working group would end up having to be like posted and all of that if we end up with quorums and, I just wanna think about that. We could talk about different standards and at least give them some
Yeah.
feedback, so then they could
I
come back to
think,
you
I think
with.
it's gonna take too long to do that kind of thing today. I think we need some kind of a workshop to do this, if we're going to do it.
We could do that.
Okay, so yes, and set up a workshop.
Yes, in a workshop.
Yes, and a workshop. Okay. Going on to the next one. Allow for conduization of existing or newly created ADUs. I'll start with this one. I was intrigued with this idea because this would, if it's a condo and you own the condo, you would be able to get some kind of financing. One of my goals in all this is to figure out ways that people can finance the purchase of the property or the purchase of the building. you can't just necessarily go in and get a mortgage if you don't happen to own the property. But if it's a condo situation, then the rules are a little bit different. So I'm intrigued. I'd love a little more information. Now, how do the rest of you feel?
Well, I was thinking about trying to put myself in somebody else's shoes. So first of all, the pro is that it's cheaper because you save on the cost of land. And then the second question was more of a question. Again, can you have the same scenario that Chris just addressed a minute ago? In terms of the con, I saw, I would picture somebody who owns a larger home, who owns the whole property, taking in a stranger into what is now going to be a condo, and find themselves being incompatible to live together. If the structure were rented, there would be more control. The owner could say, please leave. But if it's owned by somebody, that I see that might not, a
Yeah,
disincentive.
I see your point. That's
But
very,
you would still, so the homeowner could continue to have the ADU, 513 ADU.
Right.
Rented.
Standards, kind of.
So, and, I mean, you would, maybe the homeowner would only decide to do a condo or a subdivision if it was really for a specific
I'm just,
person, right? Because
Mhm.
they could
Yeah.
still rent, the renting option would still be available.
but
and
once
this would-
it's sold,
but once it's sold, you don't have control over it.
you
I
have
see
no
what you're
more
saying.
control.
Unless you set up the usual like an HOA, sort of monthly fees for condos, like are set up now in traditional
I would
condos,
think
where
that
there's some
that would have to
relationship
go.
standard there.
And then the next, also, I see people who own a large home, who are financially well off, liking their privacy. So I'm talking about disincentives, okay? I'm not saying liking their privacy too much, liking having their family and friends be able to stay with them during the summer and not have any other strangers on the property during the rest of the year. So those are two comments. And then it's, okay. And then the cost for the larger homeowner. Somewhere in my notes, I read that a condo can run up to 400 grand. If we're trying to help out people who can only afford the $220,000, is a condo is even a condo affordable for a low-income family?
Well, I don't believe this is for low income. I think this is for the attainable market.
Okay,
And if you're talking
Okay.
about like being able to purchase potentially a home for
Mm.
500,000 versus maybe 2 million, that's gonna put a bunch of people in that bracket.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
I
so-
think that it's not really for the affordable part, it's the attainable part.
yeah, my focus frankly is on the affordable part,
Mhm.
because first of all, we're legally bound to the 10%. Secondly, the projects are not affordable because it costs that much more to build on this island. And third, the income standards, the medium income standard that the state requires is lower than ours. But our medium income standard is not recognized by the state as affordable. We can get grant money, but the state doesn't recognize
Mhm.
the structure. So I think that's a much bigger problem than housing in general, from my perspective.
From what I hear and see, I think it's both. I think they're equally important, and I think you might find that the attainable is this is for attainable. This would be
Yeah.
for
This
attainable
would be
housing.
attainable and
This
it's a
would
way
be-
of
if you
financing it.
pick a property that has an ADU, we have 70 of them. So if you, and then it looks exactly the same, but the tenant could purchase it versus
Okay,
it's not going to add to the 10%. It is not going to be
No.
Yeah.
income restricted.
Mhm.
It's
And
I-
that's maybe
It's a f-
appeal to some people. So
I used the wrong word. I misspoke. It's not more important, but the affordable housing issue is more pressing because of the legality of it.
I think we need to deal with both.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's
I think we
both.
need both. Okay,
When you,
Kevin, and then we'll go to Cindy.
I think it's Peter. I've done
Sorry,
some,
Peter. It
but
says
Karen
Kevin
might
up
chime
there.
in. Karen might chime in right after she hears
That's
what
all
I
right.
say. I've done some research into this, and as far as I'm aware, there's no municipal discretion in condoization. So I don't know what New Shoreham could do in relation to any regulation of condoization of ADUs, but I'd be interested to hear what Weston and Sampson says about it. I don't know if Karen's how familiar she is with the condo laws, but as far as I'm aware, there's no municipal role in condoization other than recording condo agreements.
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with conversation. I think I would have to defer to Peter's comment that I would need to see some sort of a draft from Weston Sampson in order to comment fully. So my advice would be to take this recommendation and decide if, as a policy matter, you may want to see a draft. You may decide one way or another once you see that language. But certainly having that draft would help me to decide what kind of legal issues it may or may not bring up.
Okay, Cindy?
Thanks. That's kind of what I wanted to pick up on. And I could be wrong, but I think Peter was echoing what my thoughts were, that when it comes to condoing property, that is a form of legal ownership. I don't believe the zoning regs have authority over that. So if I have a house and a barn and for whatever reason, I want to condo that barn and sell that barn to somebody, I believe, given the legal paperwork, I can do that.
Okay.
But this is talking about newly created or existing ADUs.
correct.
So the ADUs are already encumbered by deed restrictions and rules and regulations. So the way I was reading this is, if you're going to allow ADUs, can those ADUs then be taken a step further and condoed? And that's
Yeah,
the
that's exactly-
difference.
It's just removing some language from
Yeah.
the 513, because right now it has to be held in.
Right. So, and that I think is, open for some robust discussion, but, because I think anybody can condo anything, but when you do an ADU, I believe
The
you
language in
can't.
513.
Right, you can't do that,
specific,
so.
and you cannot, correct.
Correct.
Yep,
So
you're
that's the
right.
distinction. And I think you'd have to look hard at the rules and regs on how that would work and still keep it in the affordable housing pool. It would not count, it's not going to count towards our state 10%, but
But it would count for attainable
Correct.
housing.
it would help the housing crunch. But yeah, definitely have to expand the discussion on that.
Mhm.
Okay. So do you want to put this down as a yes or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes, it is. All right. Moving on to the next one. Organize and incorporate a new nonprofit or evaluate capacity of housing to create community land trust, which could introduce 1, affordable ownership utilizing ground lease, 2, steward affordable ownership programs, and 3, community controlled affordable housing organizations. Thoughts on this one?
How's that different from the land trust that we have now?
They're using the word land trust, but I don't think that was the intent.
Ah.
I think it's more of like a housing land trust. It would basically be like similar to what we were just talking about on
Yeah.
for 3 and 4, whether it's a condo or an individual lot, and a homeowner then sells it to the housing board. The housing board buys that parcel and sells it to someone who qualifies for
Right.
whatever terms they set.
So that's like a rolling account.
Well, it's,
The money
the
has-
idea would be spreading out affordable or attainable housing through, throughout the island instead of it being clustered on one parcel. Whether it's the 20 or 5 houses, 16, it would be on individual
I think-
lots, but governed by the housing.
Part of the goal probably also is to reduce the value of the land in the acquisition price of a home. So it drives down the cost to acquire the home because you're not paying for the land.
Oh,
Right,
It's a
like
lease.
potentially the housing board could purchase, say, a 10,000 square foot lot for $200,000. I'm just making it up.
yeah.
And then they turn around and sell it, whether they sell it for 200 or they offset it 100,000. I don't know those terms. That's up to the housing board. But then they sell maybe they develop it or they allow the homeowner to develop the parcel as long as it meets the restrictions that the housing board would like to put on.
Chris?
So it's a lot less infrastructure.
Mhm. Have you guys looked at this at all?
This is a concept I've been reading quite a bit about.
Yeah.
Because I think given the dynamics right now on Block Island with the Block Island Land Trust, Housing Board and planning, morphing into a community land trust might be really one way of solving our problem being the Housing Board problem. And that problem is that we get about $160,000 a year in a tax on tourists. I have been doing financial pro formas in the last few weeks for the Housing Board, trying to figure out how to get out of our economic issue with funding. And it came to me that, we really are not a taxpayer burden. When we develop a project, that project is removed from the tax roll. And in my understanding, that is the only time I can say that we are Town of New Shore taxpayer supported, because they have to make up what's removed from the tax roll. But the tax revenue we get right now is really a tax on tourism. Whether the person collecting the tax or the business collecting the tax chooses to pass that on to the renter, that's up to them. I believe most of them do. But with this type of organization, we have a much greater chance for revenue income, which is, or asset income, whether it's land that is dedicated to us, donated to us, property, whatever this is. This asset transfer to us will have much greater financial impact on us than the current revenue that we get of $160,000 a year. If you look at the way money comes in and accumulates to us over time, it takes us an enormous amount of time to save enough money to build a project. So we can't be dynamic. We are just project oriented, and those projects take, in my opinion, far too long to build. We need more revenue in order to create affordable housing, and we just can't do it in what we get. This is a mechanism that has much more potential for us to be responsive to the state requirement and to the community's needs here. Thank you.
But Chris, I don't understand where this mechanism gets its money.
It would be mostly from donations and a tax on the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can well imagine.
Well, the tax could be accumulated, could be brought in different ways. You could decrease the land trust 3%, give us 1%, or give the community land trust 1%. Doesn't have to be a tax increase. It could be a tax on property
Redistrict-
sales and be neutral.
Of course, I'm also always thinking about if we fail to have enough affordable housing, the state is going to step in and force us to create it. And that will be a,
That's not, I
I
don't
doubt
think
it.
I
that's
don't
what
think
it
that's-
says.
no?
No,
Yeah, I doubt,
Yeah.
it's just my opinion.
I don't think that's the 10%.
Oh,
So I think what we're saying is we
I'll explain
probably would like to explore this.
Really
more.
want.
Yeah.
Particularly since there are some examples that have been given here where we could get reports from them on how they've
How they did it.
operated, how successful, what problems, concerns they ran into, et cetera. So there is material available for this.
Definitely.
Okay, so I'll put down as a yes.
Chris, you've looked into the church community housing group, right? And
Yeah, and here's an interesting fact with our warrant request. Church community housing has 150 projects right now underway for affordable housing. And they said we would be much more attractive as a partnership with them if that warrant goes forward. And they have such a good model as a community land trust. We're volunteers. We don't have the resources of church community housing. And they are basically a professional affordable housing development company out of Newport. It's pretty interesting how successful they are. I got in touch with them because I was trying to write an energy grant for our project. And they just wanted to help us out so much.
Where does their funding? How do they get?
I don't know how they do it. I don't know what their business
Because I
model.
feel like that's.
Oh, okay. Well, they do use a lot of the mechanisms that with the tax maneuvers that we can't do, but they can do, and other consultants that we've had have not used. They are seems broader and I might want to say more sophisticated, but they try a lot of different widgets to do this. They seem to be very innovative and knowledgeable in what they can access and leverage for funding.
For more creative funding.
Yeah, there's more mechanisms out there than we possibly know how to deal with. And that's because that's their business. They
Yeah.
Okay,
thrive on it.
good. We'll put it down as a yes.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, next one is create ADU support program. Fund and align enforceable policy with ADU technical and or financial assistance programs. Provide coaching, technical assistance, fund pre-approved design, and provide loans. I certainly think this is something we probably want to have them give us some more information on.
We've started.
We've started with
Down
the
the road.
pre-approved designs, which
Yep.
we've begun, but we have not finished the process. So that certainly is what I have them emphasize that. And I certainly would like to know if sources, if they're already for loans, and that sort of ties in with some of the things Chris was saying too.
and that might be just a recommendation to the town council and the housing board.
Yep,
As opposed to just creating an ordinance.
yeah. I mean, there's a possibility that there may be some kind of incentive for reduced taxes if you have an ADU, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that would go through, I would obviously go through the town council.
And then provide coaching and technical assistance. I do that now, so
Yeah.
that's something that I spend a lot of time with homeowners who would like to build an ADU. so.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so that's a yes.
I have one question, Jen.
Sure.
In the reading, I didn't see, and maybe Chris, you would know this too, or Cindy, is there any, does the ADU have to be a separate building? Could it be someone like expanding their basement for an ADU?
It could
Does-
be located in the basement.
It could.
Or a
okay.
separate building.
Or a separate building.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. The next one. Collaborate with Conservation Land Trust for affordable housing. Would have affordable housing and conservation organizations adopt policies of geographic non-competition, cooperative acquisitions, or aligned public education. Comments on this one?
Okay, I'll give you my take on this. I really like to explore it. I think there's enough land that's still open space. Now, this is my understanding. Are we talking about when they acquire land, being allowed to set aside a small portion of that for affordable housing?
I
Yeah.
think that's what this is saying.
So
I
that-
don't know One of the things we don't know is, do the bylaws of these various organizations allow them to do such a thing?
Mhm.
And somebody may know the answer, I don't.
So the-
I think one of the real encouraging things is how many of these fronts Block Island is proactively working on, or has been ahead of the game for the rest of the state. We have a wonderful land trust that's been incredibly effective the last 4 decades. But their set of bylaws, their enabling legislation does not allow them to dabble in affordable housing. They cannot purchase land for affordable housing. It would require them going to the legislature and rewriting their ordinance, probably, the previous slide that we were talking about, to create a conservation land trust. That concept would include land preservation as well as affordable land. They don't have that in their charter. And they are reticent and concerned about going back to the state to open up their legislation to be able to provide those things. And I fully understand that.
Yeah, if you
On the-
lost what you've already got, that could be very
Yeah,
upsetting.
so it's-
no, we don't
it's-
wanna rock-
It's a concern.
Could they
On the-
reallocate the 3%? Couldn't the, I mean, I really don't know the answer to this. That's why I'm asking.
No,
Oh,
I don't believe they could allocate their 3%. They could reduce their 3%. And you
Okay.
all might be aware of some pending legislation with Senator Gu that would allow cities and towns enabling legislations to have a conveyance fee on real estate transactions. Well, we already have that. But if that miraculously came to happen and the town council wanted to work with that, they could or they couldn't, depending upon what they wanted to do, they could, we could then enter into a dialogue with the land trust and see if we couldn't reduce the land trust, and then the town could have a 1% fee levied that would go to affordable housing. So there are some legislative things in the works that might sidestep this whole specter of having to change one's legislation. Conversely, the housing board, we don't talk about land conservation in our enabling legislation. We're talking about acquiring land for affordable housing. And similar, the previous slide when they're talking about creating a conservation land trust, there are a number of conservation land trusts that have been created. They don't have an income source. They're struggling to find funding, just as we are struggling to find funding for the housing board.
And Cindy, if the housing board acquired a piece of land and you were going to do a cluster, flexible design subdivision, and 2 acres of open space was remaining, could that land trust purchase that so that it would help the housing board
Yes.
create the housing?
And historically, back to the early days of the land trust, one of the very first projects on Beacon Hill was made possible through the land trust, flexing their rules to be able to acquire open space and donate the value of that to the project and make it happen. And I do want to say that the land trust has been of late extremely open to the concept of supporting affordable housing. They value affordable housing. I have had a number of conversations with them, and they are, open to, whenever they're looking at an acquisition, seeing if there is any way to partner to, create a spot for affordable housing. It has to be done a priori. You can't land trust can't buy a piece of land and then after the fact say, oh, how can we make this work? It has to be done during the acquisition process to make it work.
So they could, like, say they were looking at a piece of property, could they approach the housing board
Absolutely.
to work together?
Absolutely.
And you put some of your funding, they put some of their funding,
Right.
and then it would create.
And we are hoping to have those opportunities. And I think they're very open to it. So I think between this possible legislation and more communication and working with the land trust, there
Okay,
could
so
be
it's
some
not-
opportunities.
So we already-
Yeah, right.
I think we've, and I don't want to rock the boat, so I think that we will put, this is a no, because there are some other things that we are by far more in need of guidance.
I think this is the underscore for the
Okay.
land trust, the housing board, the housing initiative, Block Island Economic Development Foundation. I think this is the opening for them to have renewed communication and shared goals.
I mean, could we
Make that a recommendation.
not send it to, like, ask Weston and Sampson to
Yeah.
work on it, but keep
Yeah,
it,
that we could do.
earmark it for a future agenda item
Yeah.
so that we circle back to it to
That's
make
fine.
sure things are.
And Joe is just
Moving.
sharing that it's
That-
on the agenda for the Block Island Land Trust tomorrow.
Oh, okay,
So-
perfect timing.
So I'll just put future agenda. but we
Future
won't
agenda,
send
right.
this to,
But no for the list to Weston and Sampson. Chris?
I'm want to challenge the thought that of rocking the boat, because I've heard that from past town council members with regard to the Block Island Land Trust. You know, as though if you touch it, you're going to lose it. I think that is just not true, because you cannot undo the great things the Land Trust has done since its inception. You can't. It's legally impossible, you know, unless, you know, there's some Donald Trump gets involved. So my point,
Say, Chris, we don't want it in future to have the state legislature change the wording and
And-
do away with what they've already got.
No, I-
think that's where I'm coming from.
my position is that because the Land Trust is reticent to touch any of their enabling legislation, and I will give you their rules and regulations, operating rules that show that things can be done. It is a mathematical fact that more and more land will be put aside, exacerbating what I feel is the affordable housing crisis here. And the reality of the situation is that things need to change since the Land Trust was conceived and initiated, because it's been a long time and things change and the world has changed and Block Island has changed. And we are supposed to be a coordinated community, and we can't operate in separate fiefdoms. And that's what is really good about this meeting, is that we get a chance, everyone gets a chance to discuss how to try and coordinate ourselves better. So I would like you just to understand that, in my opinion, land trust can change and it won't damage them. Thank you.
Going on to number 8 is the same thing.
Yeah.
Oh, Martha, I'm sorry, didn't see your hand up.
I didn't have it up.
Okay.
Just listening to Chris, I just wasn't sure. When was the last time the land trust legislation was changed?
Okay, I have no idea.
Been amended twice, and I don't know, the first time was in 1989, and that was to basically, the power company had been sold, and it had not generated a fee because they sold the corporation. So they set up provisions then for corporate sales of corporations being taxed and partnerships, even if the real estate wasn't specifically conveyed. That was the First Amendment. The Second Amendment was probably in the early 2000s, and that was to increase the first-time homeowner exemption. Those are the only two amendments since 1986 when it was adopted.
Okay, thank you.
The second one was 2002. And everyone told us, you'll lose it. And housing was that year. That was the year we got the housing board through, I think. Housing was a real hot topic, hot button topic up there. And these things just went through. And that's always, and I've never understood the fact that, you know, they have been changed, not for huge things, not for, and frankly, I think it's time that the exemption on first-time home buyers was revisited. It's been a long time. I think it's been over 20 years. 22 years. It was, no, I know when it was. Yeah, I was first warden. That's why. So I do think there's some validity in what Chris says. I don't think you want to go nuts, but again, ride the wave of housing in the state. We're not going to, I'm sure most of you have seen Apollo 13. And everybody wants to talk about when a round peg, square hole, whatever. Do you remember the scene in that movie where we have to get this piece connecting to this piece, and they bring these two things out on the table and throw them down, and literally there's the round peg and the square hole, or triangular, I think it might have been. And this is what you have to do to fix it. And one of the things was duct tape. And NASA fixed it, and they got those people back. It's not undoable. You just have to go beyond what mainland consultants are going to tell you.
Thank you. Any other comments before we go on?
Yeah.
Oh, Joe. Oh, you're ready.
I'm not speaking for the land trust now, but I've thought about this for a long time. I think right now you have the pieces all in place. I think the housing board is very competent to deal with housing. I think the land trust is very competent to deal with land acquisition. What's lacking when we try to work together is a funding mechanism for the housing board. If they had a percentage transfer fee like we do, and right now the council could push ours up to 5 if we went to them. They're allowed to do that much. So if there was a balance somewhere between there, the housing board had a similar mechanism. I think you'd see a lot more projects working together because we'd both have money to bring into them.
Good point. Thank you. Okay. Great. Any other comments? Well, that will not be on the high priority list. Okay, page 8 is the same thing. So we'll go on to page 9. Tax exemptions for year-round rentals. Explore providing tax incentives to owners who offer year-round rental of their homes, potentially just to income eligible residents.
Don't we have that?
No.
But I thought that the goal with the homestead exemption was to eventually allow for that to, is that part of the goal there? To
Yes.
have that allow that to be
I
applied
know
to
that-
people who
yes.
rent year round?
Correct. I think they're working on it. So that's just really, I mean, if you support that,
If I were
I
up
don't
to
think
me,
you
I'd-
need to send it to Weston and Sampson, but you could.
Are there other ideas
I
in there
would,
that was the first one
yeah.
that came to mind, but
Yeah.
are there other
I'd
ideas
love
out
to
there?
have-
No, I think we were working on this document, I mean, last summer.
Yeah.
So it was before the town, I think they just started the homestead exemption and then have started talking about the year-round, tax reduction, incentive.
Since funding is so fundamental for a project to succeed, I'd like to hear if Weston and Sampson has other ideas that we have not already explored. So in that respect, I'd like to put it on the list, but I can be talked out of it if you really all disagree.
No, I think it's
Chris?
important to figure out some.
Are you saying like, are you talking about like just for tax incentives or just specifically, if the town's already working on the tax incentives?
I was thinking
Were you-
tax incentives is one way of helping somebody purchase house, explore how they're gonna finance it.
No, this is if you are a homeowner and
You want.
you don't qualify for the homestead, but you rent to,
Oh, I see. what
you
you're
have an
saying.
ADU on your property or
You would
you
get a
don't have
tax
an
break
ADU,
on
but
that.
you rent,
Right.
But you would get a tax
You're-
break. Okay.
correct, your prior.
Is that already in the works?
That is,
So maybe we don't need to put it on then.
But
okay.
I don't know if there are other ideas out there.
That's what I
That
was-
What I was
Yeah.
trying to say next is,
Yeah.
I think that we should be supportive of that, and are there other ideas out there? You know, they had this
Okay.
seasonal community designation establishes local option, the development of year-round rental units.
So I could,
So maybe,
Maybe that's
Peter,
What
Peter
other
and I
incentives
could,
are there to the home?
Yeah, what are the
Right,
other
Peter
tools
could work
available?
would be willing, maybe Peter would be willing to work on bringing back a few.
Yeah, Chris?
I think in the macroeconomics, this is a good idea because if you're able to incentivize a homeowner through this tax
Yeah.
relief to have a person employed on the island full-time, the resident income or spending that is left on this island by that person earning income, it won't match the tax relief or the tax relief given to the owner completely. But I think it would go a long ways to that, and I'd be happy to take a shot at the math at that. What we forget is this is kind of like also economic development. So many people now are commuting to do work, contractors, et cetera. And you've seen other island communities have teachers commute and police, whatever, town workers. If the person stays on Block Island, much more of their income stays on the island. And I think that's a good economic development incentive for doing this. Thank you.
Okay,
Peter has something.
Peter?
I missed exactly what I just got voluntold to do, but Newport does have this exact tax system, and it helps. It doesn't change the game, but it does help encourage year-round rentals.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, so we'll put down for yes to continue exploring that. Okay, on the last page, there are other actions from the comp plan. Is there anything on here in particular? Because some things we're already doing, but you would particularly like the group from Weston and Sampson to take a look at.
Identify additional sources of funding.
Okay, that's,
Just being creative about that. I think,
That ties
that
in with
seems
the
to
last
just be
meeting.
the fundamental problem. Like,
Okay.
just gets,
I will,
Yeah.
if they're,
yeah. Yeah, if that could tie in with the last one. it would
sure,
be very-
I'll
Yeah,
ask them about that. I don't know if that was part of the,
no, I don't know.
they're
that
working
it-
under a
it's
grant.
under our-
so I-
But it
yeah,
could be-
yeah.
plan, yeah.
It
just-
it could be tied into that. And other than that,
I
Oh.
have a few things that I just
Okay, go
want to
ahead.
share. How about going back to the state and renegotiating the gross median income standard? It's my understanding that the state has one standard for the whole state, and certainly the income brackets vary greatly in certain areas, and that puts us at a disadvantage. And the second comment I have is, what if we were to provide building height relief so that we can construct apartments at the police station, the town hall, and a school? It's just a thought. I imagine that building rental units is cheaper than building housing. So maybe the housing board should pursue rentals, even though surveys show that people prefer ownership. And I wonder if it's possible to explore less expensive construction materials. That was another thought I had. And I think that's it. So what are the legal consequences if we do not meet the 10%? What can it?
Certain funding, right? Is that, or no?
Does anybody know?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's,
It does.
go ahead.
Go ahead,
Oh,
go ahead, Karen.
yeah.
I mean, I don't,
Yeah, there are consequences. I believe, I'm just pulling it up now, but I believe it has to do with your comp plan, and other items. It is statutorily mandated. So, but my understanding, Jen, am I wrong? You're meeting that now.
we're just under the 10%, but it's my
10%,
understanding that if we're not at the 10%, it opens the town up to the comprehensive permits, by private developers.
Correct.
Yeah, it's a different approval standard, whether or not you meet 10%.
That's that 10% number. Why
And then I
that-
think it might affect your school aid formula, but I think New Shoreham school aid is pretty minimal.
And the
We did need it.
comprehensive permit standard means that if you have a developer that comes to town and wants to do affordable housing, because you don't meet the 10%, they enjoy what we'll call an easier permitting process to get their project done because it includes affordable.
I don't know. if
And
anyone
then,
Received
the-
comprehensive permits at one point, and they were very, very large projects.
Yeah.
for your comprehensive plan update every 10 years, if you don't meet the 10%, the state wants an affordable housing plan to get you to 10%. And if you're at 10% or above, then you can just say, we don't need an affordable housing plan. Although that New Shoreham, for other reasons, may not choose to do that in its next comprehensive plan update.
I'm pretty sure you already have that in your comp plan.
A plan.
Okay. So you've got enough information to put together a list for Sampson and Weston?
I think so. I mean, when you look at the action items on page 10, you have, I mean, we're kind of already doing some of them, like the
Yeah, most-
monitoring, the
the only
ADUs,
one
we
that
do
we-
that, the tax abatement, that's.
The only one
discussions.
interested was number one, identifying additional sources of funding for affordable housing trust.
Yep.
And I think the rest of a lot of these, we're already doing or exploring doing.
Yes.
No, we've lost a lot of what we once thought were affordable housing because the state doesn't count them. And I understand that the structures on Beacon Hill were restricted only for 30 years, but I've yet to learn what the reasons were for Old Harbor Meadow, for Cherry Hill, for Harbor Church, and for Baker Hill. Because if I don't know why they are rejected, we could be repeating those mistakes.
And some of them did count for several years.
But no longer, right? So shouldn't we know why they are now rejected so we
Maybe
don't repeat
Speak
history?
to that.
Little bit of history. Beacon Hill was one of the first affordable projects out here. East Earls Ball, I think, was before that. Beacon Hill was second. And at that time, it's 45 years ago, 40 years ago, I don't know, a long time ago, the state language was to restrict it for 30 years.
Right.
That was the definition.
Right.
So that was the max that they were allowed to do.
Right.
Now, the language reads in perpetuity. But then they did the max that was allowable. So anybody who has owned their home for 30 some odd years is out of the affordable housing program. If the house transacted any time, and there were a few that did turn over, the clock started again. So at each sale point, it starts again for 30 years. But those guys are at 30 years.
Yeah, I understand that, but I don't know about the others.
The others are in perpetuity. The reason for what the state counts and what the state doesn't count is a source of
Oh, you're putting it politely.
I mean, we.
frustration for us. I guess that's the word, frustration for us. So, for instance, easy one, the church.
Yeah.
The church was privately funded. The rates that they are charging there are well below any state,
I don't understand why
Yeah.
that doesn't count.
well below. The reason that it doesn't count is that property is not, those apartments are not deeded in perpetuity. They're owned by the church.
Well,
And-
but they could, you could have covenants and restrictions and deeds.
Which they do, but they're not significant. I would say that the church trustees are hesitant to say forever and
Yeah.
forward, that,
Oh,
this, yeah. So I think that's the language that the state
I
wants.
understand that.
I
From
think
their
they were
point of view.
approved, though,
Yeah.
the way that they were approved. Under
They
the
don't
state,
agree.
It is.
I mean, they fit every criteria except the deeded in perpetuity.
Okay, it's the deeded part.
And what about
But they fit-
Cherry?
Cherry Hill, at the time, I don't remember how many years ago, maybe 10 or more years ago, the town council, and it's in our zoning ordinance, established the definition of affordable housing at 140% of AMI. adjusted moderate income. So we qualified people based on 140%. The state regulations are 120%. We subsequently went to the state and asked for that dispensation. And after 2 tries, we did get approval from the state that Block Island had a dispensation at 140. But there was the few that fell through the cracks there, Cherry Hill, which was qualified at 140 and then not accepted afterwards because it was retroactive. The timing was wrong. The timing was wrong.
Okay.
So Cherry Hill and the same with Baker Hill, those 2. We qualified everyone at 140, but in fact, at that moment in time, the state it was only acknowledging 120. Then, unfortunately, with our legislation that we tried so hard to get from the state to get that 140, there was a little proviso in there that was written in at the 11th hour of our appearance at the State House. And it says something to the effect of, should the town of New Shoreham's affordable housing stock drop below 10%, then you have to go back to 120, qualifying people at 120. So they gave with one hand, they took away with the other, and source of great frustration to us.
Cindy, if you go back to 140, or if you get the number up to 10%, will they?
Then we're back at
ratchet
140.
it up to
Right. And Chris, your math is way better than mine, but the state is all the cities and towns are grouped according to census data, I guess. And the group that we are in and cannot get out of gives various thresholds for income levels and affordability. And we have been trying to have our voice be heard to say we really should be in another group. We should be with Middletown and Newport, which has, just by the computations, a 20% increase in their thresholds. And I don't know why we can't have that, but so far we
How do we
have
get
not.
that?
How did Newport get it?
How do we like get?
What they tell me is that it's census data.
Oh,
But-
census data.
But if anybody saw another source of concern, the housing report, the Block Island, no, excuse me, the Housing Works Fact Book 2024, if anybody saw that.
I did. I can
Um,
send it. I'll send it.
Very interesting data there. And I've got some calls into some of the folks there, haven't called back. But if they give, each city has an analysis of their population, their median income, so, and their average sale price. And I went through the whole booklet of all the cities and towns. And with the exception of Jamestown, which has an average sale price of $1,000,015, that's their average. With the exception of that, everybody else is way below $1 million. New Shoreham is a medium single-family home price of $1,650,000. And when you look at the median household income, New Shoreham is pegged at $66,652. And when you look at the income average of all the other communities, we are in with Pawtucket, Providence, and Central Falls. Everybody else is way more expensive, way more affluent than we are. So anyway, very interesting stuff in this. And those statistics alone should show the huge gap that we are facing here. Average income and cost of housing.
So isn't that a good reason to pursue the state? To ask this company for guidance, how we might have someone represent Block Island at the state level and talk about this a little more?
Well, our lobbyists are aware of this, and we've been complaining to Rhode Island Housing. You know, I think our voice is getting louder. Where it's going to take us, I don't know. But this certainly shows a huge gap in our
So
community.
if yelling loud enough is not good enough or not effective enough, do you have any suggestions?
I'm all ears.
Last question though, why did Old Harbor Meadows lose? Wasn't.
Jen, do you know that? I don't know the answer to that one. That's a Block Island Economic Development, and
The apartment that is located in the Early Learning Center,
above
Right.
upstairs. Yeah.
And why is that not counted anymore?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I was kind of the coordinator for the the
Okay,
reporting to the state
okay.
at one point, and I think before we even had a housing board, but it was counted. And then they took that one off the list.
So
Because it is
theoretically.
restricted, it's restricted according to the planned development. So
Is it not deed restricted?
I would have to go back and look. It was in
Well,
2000,
the
so I
community
think-
center might not
Do the same.
qualify.
You're
Yeah.
doing the same as the
Yeah.
church,
Yeah.
right, they may
Okay,
choose to rent it year round, but it doesn't necessarily mean it.
Yeah.
since we have to be out of here by 6:30 because there's a town council
okay.
meeting at 7. Well, unless there's anything pressing on number 1, I want to move on to number 2.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you guys
Thank
for
you.
coming. I certainly do appreciate both your being here and the very useful information. So we hope to see you again once we get some answers back, and we'll pick your brains again. Okay, number 2, Town of New Shoreham, Block Island Health Services. Application for development plan review to install a ground-mounted solar energy system. The property is located in the medical center zone. Zoning ordinance, section 425. Any ground-mounted solar array exceeding 720 square feet requires a special use permit. However, this property is located in the medical center zone and the permitting authority is the planning board. So we are to review and act on the waivers request and then to set a date for the public hearing. Okay, Ray, I hope you're presenting.
Yes.
If you'll come to the microphone, please, and introduce yourself and tell us what we need to know.
I think most of you know me. I'm Ray Torrey. I'm the co-chair of the building committee for the Block Island Medical Center. And we have we have finished most of our work there, and it's a wonderful facility. To give you some background on this solar project, it was at the request and of none other than Don McCluskey that we establish a solar array there, a ground-mounted solar array to help the town and help the medical facility handle their energy costs. And the new facility is 100% electric now, whereas we had used in heating oil and propane. Now it's all electric. The bad part about that is that our consumption has at least doubled, perhaps tripled. And with our 4 buildings that exist on that campus now, the main medical facility and the doctor's house and the Davidson house where the nurse practitioner lives, and our new residence building. And together, the last bit of mathematics I did on it was showed that we would probably be using close to 100,000 kilowatt hours a year. And it would run, it's running us over $50,000 a year just to pay for the electricity. So Don McCluskey said he would donate and fund this sort of an array. And we've been not fooling around, but trying to get it done for at least a year now. And it's a big array, but we have a perfect spot for it. It sits about 125 feet to the north of the residence building. As you can see on your site plan, it's oriented to face true south. So that's why it's a little bit canted on the alignment for the property. But nonetheless, it will give us at least 90,000 kilowatt hours a year, coupled with the existing solar on the medical center building. As Dr. Bowdy and I had that put up about, I guess, 8 years ago, and it's been very successful. There's 26 panels on the roof of the building now, and there'll be 144 on this ground array in 4 different rows. So yeah, 36 panels each row. So I wanted to emphasize that it's all the money going to pay for this comes from the McCluskey family. They are the sponsors of our local solar initiative, but the money's coming directly from McCluskey Foundation. So you have the papers in front of you, and I have the same papers here. So if you have any technical questions or anything, has been one change. It happened just yesterday, and so it does not really appear on the site maps you have, but Chirenzi and Associates was the engineering firm that we used to design and figure out the stormwater abatement apparatus that we would need. And Mr. Jim Jeremiah yesterday just informed Mr. Terentia that he would like to see individual stone trenches for each of the rows. So your maps show one at the north end, but we will have, and you will have updated site maps for the public hearing if you decide to let it go to public hearing. And so there'll be a stone trench for each of the 4 rows instead of just one trench. So that's the only change that happened, and this happened yesterday afternoon. So you probably, I don't know if you have that.
We have the letter. You received the
We have that. Yeah. So that's what that's all about. Mr. Jeremiah thought that was appropriate to have 4 trenches rather than 1. So.
Okay, I have a couple questions for you. How does the size of each one of these arrays compare to the one that is in the parking lot out here?
Well, first of all, it'll be a lot lower. The height will be 9 feet, and I imagine those panels out there might be, I don't know.
I think that for the hearing, it certainly would be helpful for us to visualize if you could tell us how the size that you're going to put in would compare to the size that is in the parking lot. So it would help us to visualize that.
I think, well,
Width and height and obviously length, so how many panels are going to go into there.
well, it'll probably be about the same width, except there'll be 4 rows of them.
Yeah,
So I imagine it'll be,
I'm very concerned about the size and the massing of this. It's going to be large.
yes, but to speak to that, it'll have less visual effect than the one back of this building, because it'll be only 9 feet high, and although it's about 60 feet long and about 35, 40 feet deep. But as you know, back there, the property starts to slope down. And the array has been kept within the, it doesn't intrude upon the wetland area or the buffer zone, but yet it's far enough away from all the buildings. Even the doctor's house would have, you know, if you've been up there, that property has one of the best views on the island. You can see all the way from, you can, it's just, it's spectacular. And I doubt whether this is going to, you know, it's not going to be in anybody's face, particularly the abutters to the east.
Okay, that is a concern. I assume you looked at putting them on roofs and that did not work. Is that correct?
On the roof of which,
Well, say for example, the new building that you've just finished building,
uh,
why would you not put the solar panels on the roof?
the roof, there is an existing array on the roof now.
On the roof of the original building, yes.
Oh, you mean of the addition?
Yeah, the residents,
Or the residence building and the Davidson house and the new addition that is an extension of the original building.
yeah,
Their roof lines are, well, the roof ridges on those three buildings are oriented north-south so that the array would point west or east, which is not appropriate for, you want your array to face the south. And so if it faces west, you get maybe 60% of what you would get if it was facing south.
okay.
So that's why it's, and for some reason, and I agree with it, Don McCluskey was adamant about a ground array.
Okay, I'm just asking because these are questions that I think most people will ask.
Yeah.
And want to know, because it's obviously if it's on the roof, it's safer, because my other concern is vandalism. And this is very near the school and it can be a long winter and kids don't have anything to do, and I'm a little concerned about vandalism when they're on the ground level.
Yeah, well, it could, these are fairly resilient, the panels themselves. I mean, to hailstones and whatnot. I suppose, I'm sure somebody threw a rock, it'd be another story. But the array is down near toward the north end of the school athletic field. And there's vegetation there and everything. Someone could easily say, you know, I suppose throw a baseball over there and it could do a little damage, but
Okay, that's just concern for you all to
Yeah.
keep in mind.
So,
Other questions?
yeah,
Sasha?
sometimes things are what they call an attractive nuisance. Is there a protection of some sort around this array so that children from the school especially are going to play around in there?
to my knowledge, we've never had a problem with anyone trespassing from the school onto that property. And no, to answer your question, no, there's not. But it's not like we have a swimming pool there. We have to worry about people drowning. And I have visited a couple of solar arrays, much larger, in Rhode Island, and there's no fencing. You can walk right, stroll through they're kind of nice. It's about 9 feet between the rows, and I don't know. I'm prejudiced for solar, and I have a solar on my roof, and I also monitor the production of the solar array that exists now on the medical center roof, and it helps a lot.
I've also got solar panels. I'm not opposed to solar panels. I am concerned about how large this project is.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to solar power. I enjoy using it myself, as a matter of fact. Other questions? from the board?
The is there any landscaping shielding that is recommended?
No, there isn't.
Should there be?
Because of where it's located, I would say no, but that's a question that we could certainly ask for more information.
I think that if you go through your checklist for development plan review.
Yeah, which I will do when we finish this.
Then you could potentially,
yeah. Add that.
And we could add that to the list, some kind of speed. Okay, keep that in mind, because after we finish questions, I'll go through the checklist.
just because it's a waiver request,
Yeah.
so if you would like a partial landscaping plan or a
Mm.
full, you just let them know.
I'm just curious, how much will this offset, your energy, how much energy? do you
I'm
anticipate
hoping,
this will
I don't really know.
generate?
And I can't be sure, but if what they tell me is true about the production of this, it will meet about 85% of our electrical needs. It'll save us it'll save us, $40,000 or more a year.
That's great.
Mary, you have any questions?
I had a lot of the same questions you did. And first of all, thanks for doing all this. It's a
Well,
great project
You're welcome.
and a beautiful campus, as you say. I had sort of the same questions as Margie had in
Okay.
terms about aesthetics and size and I didn't go up there, I'm sorry, to look at the site where it is. I was just curious, is there any habitat disruption, any trees taken down?
Well, there's some low vegetation and a couple of small trees on the east boundary that'll sort of shelter, the closest house, so you have behind the, school athletic facility there and their field, then you have, Tristan Payne,
Mhm.
but he has a garage behind his house, and behind that is trees. I doubt whether he'll see it at all.
Mm.
And then the closest house sits down further to the north, and I believe that's Barbara Reynolds'
Yeah, it's
house.
low.
And she has a deck in the back, but she might see it, but it won't be, it's not adjacent to her. She is further down.
Mhm.
And we can't go any further north than we have because it was, had a biologist come out just 2 weeks ago and stick the land and there is, it goes all the way down to Ebbets Hollow, that lot.
Yeah.
And down at Ebbets Hollow, it's wetland down there.
Yeah.
So we had to,
Can't
You know,
go there.
plus 100-foot buffer, plus another 50-foot. And anyway, it's where it has to be.
Mhm. And I also just wondered, and I thank you for that, to say 36 panels, in 4 rows, because I couldn't visualize it, although in your.
I thought, it is on the site plan. I don't know if you have that.
Yeah, there is a site plan. I wondered if you could merge the site plan to do this aerial photograph, because I think it would help going forward. For
Yeah, I have
people
a,
to
I have a
see
copy of that.
where they begin to the north of that existing building? On lot 10-2, because you have the drawing information, which is great on that site plan, but it doesn't take this.
You don't have to.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, that's great.
I do.
This was in,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
in your
it could be
mailbox.
my mistake, not Jen's, that I don't have it. I'll look and see, thanks.
This is the residence building
Mhm, yeah.
where the students and practitioner, extra
Mhm.
practitioner lives.
Mhm.
Then these are the 4
Panels, yeah,
rows of panels.
Yeah. okay.
And this is the infiltration ditch here.
Yeah,
That'll be stone, except we're gonna have one in each, behind each row instead of just one.
Because of the runoff, yeah, that was the concern too.
That was
Okay.
Mr. Jeremiah's.
Yeah.
So, right, there'll be in the next site plan, there'll be one, a trench here, a trench here, a trench here, a trench here.
Yeah, before of them.
4 of those.
And,
I don't think they'll
and
be
north,
wide,
south
you know,
of them, or?
Not as wide as that single one.
On your
It looked wide.
area, it's 5 feet wide and 3 feet deep,
Mm.
60 feet, 62 feet long. And the cubic feet of water that has to
Yeah.
accommodate after it's filled with stone is, it's about one third of the total, it's about 140 cubic feet of water. So I imagine each, Terenzia will design a new site plan.
Yeah.
With 4 rows, with 4 infiltration ditches. And I imagine that, Mr. Jeremiah's recommendation and requirement, he felt that each row of panels would, had to be, accommodated with their own.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he
Yeah.
was afraid of it too much going down. to the-
Right.
to the west.
If it's
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So when you redo this, put all these statistics and the stuff that, so that we can look at it and see exactly how wide the ditch is. And,
Absolutely, yeah.
and it wouldn't hurt if you had a large copy for people for the public hearing so that they'd be able to see it.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have, just to get through the winter, I've been.
Right, can you please speak at the
Okay.
microphone? I'm sorry.
I keep forgetting.
I think that you, I'm assuming you will have Sharenzia and Associates here for the public hearing?
Yes,
Okay.
Good.
And then when you are sending letters out to abutters, if abutters ask to see the plan, when are you going to have the revised plan?
I should have it, early, I should have it perhaps tomorrow or the next day,
Oh, okay, all right.
yeah.
So that will address.
Yeah.
But I heard from Terenzi this morning and, Charlie showed me a email from Terenzia saying that there's no problem. He's going to provide, individual the stone ditches for this. But what I was saying, Margie, is that, Susan Stover asked me to, having an Earth Day, as they do every year at the Harbor Church.
Right.
It's in a couple of weeks. And she thought it would be good for the community to show how the medical center is, being green and going
I think
solar.
That's a great idea.
And so I've made a scale.
Oh, really? Good for
And
you.
I've got all the buildings and I've got the solar arrays. So maybe I could bring that to the hearing.
Please.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Because I think we're all having trouble visualizing. We know it's very large, but actual visualizing with a model would be very helpful. So that's
Okay.
great. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
All right.
Thank you. for the
Thank you.
work.
Don't go away. We're still,
Oh,
I need to go through the checklist
Oh,
very
yeah.
quickly. So, you get my glasses on here. Okay, we have a list of names and addresses, no problem. We have a copy of all the variances, modifications, that's fine. Number 3, you've asked, you submitted, stuff for the special use permit, which we have, the forms of that. Then under number 4, your information regarding provisions for emergency access is required in section 501. I'm assuming that your roads it serves for the medical center buildings will also serve for the solar array, because you've asked for that waiver to be requested for emergency access.
could you go over that question again?
It says information regarding provisions for emergency access as required in section 501A2.
Would that be a road? You're
Yeah.
talking- Yes. Well, on the, I don't know, I guess maybe the road is not being shown on that site plan, but there's been a nicely constructed gravel road that goes back. And then as it goes back by the resident building, it's reinforced by that, what do they call that, Charlie? Yeah, there's pavers in the road,
So
so,
just change the waiver request to submitted.
yeah, it's,
So it'd be submitted, because make sure that's on the new,
I will,
that's on the new
I
thing.
will, I'm
Yeah.
updating this.
So that we will have that to look at, because right now, that doesn't show it, I was gonna require it. But that's fine. Okay, the next one, materials indicating soil type and groundwater conditions. I do not feel that is necessary. So I agree with the waiver request, if that's okay with the rest of the council. We did look at a lot of nutrients and so forth a couple years ago when you did the buildings. Drainage analysis, you're working on that as we speak.
So are you
So
going
we-
to say,
They are
you're not
requesting-
granting that waiver, correct?
Correct.
Because you're
No.
asking them to comply with.
Correct.
They have
the
to
town
comply with
engineers.
that, so the answer is no on that one. Okay, nutrient loading analysis, documenting compliance with requirements of section 501A6. Again, I don't think the nutrient is a problem, so I'm willing to grant that waiver.
Agreed.
Okay. Number 8, the erosion control plan consisting of requirements of 501A7.
Well, that
Mr.
ties in.
Renzi is.
Well, that ties in, so I think the
Yeah.
answer is you have to have that on the chart,
Mm-hmm.
for the, control for the 4 ditches.
So
So-
that's number 8.
Number
Number
8, so
eight.
no, we're not requiring,
Right.
we're not granting that. Number 9, all zoning board decisions affecting the site, yes, you gave that, so that's fine. 10, for a commercial structure, including parking, circulation plans, landscaping, deed restrictions of the property. We got, I think we are concerned about a possible landscaping where it's possible that people would see. So perhaps a landscaping
we can put shrubbery,
shrubbery of-
yeah, on the south side
of
of,
the-
it.
we're gonna have the houses, yes.
yeah, without interfering with the, production, solar production.
Yeah, 'cause we do, obviously, you don't want to interfere with
Yeah.
that, if we're paying a lot of money.
So you
For the.
put that on paper and submit it to.
I will.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll put a no for that, but I will specify that we're only asking for landscaping information. We do not need the parking and circulation plans, and we don't need any deed restrictions. That's already taken care of. So we're just asking for landscaping.
Okay,
And 11, letters from the from the town building official and the zoning official. And yes, you've requested those, so that's fine. So any comments or questions? Okay. Do we need a motion to approve his waivers?
Yes.
Okay, I make a motion that we approve waivers for okay, for number 4.
No, you're not approving the waiver for number 4, 5, 8,
Okay,
and landscaping of 10.
okay. So do I have a second?
Second.
Do I hear all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, and we need to set a hearing date. Will you be able to come and get everything together and get it to us by next month, which would be May 14th?
May 14th, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, then I'll make a motion that we schedule a public hearing for Wednesday, May 14th. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
coming, and
Thank
Thank you
you.
for all your work. I'm looking forward to seeing that model.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 3, Block Island Land Trust. Martha Ball and William Ball, plat 3, lot 118. Pre-application for a minor subdivision off of Fort Neck Road.
Good evening, Joseph Priestley representing the Block Island Land Trust. Martha Ball is here with Joe Marie Andrews. And the Ball Farm consists of approximately 24 acres, just under 24 acres of land. Approximately 12 acres of it, the northwest field and the northeast field, are subject to conservation easements to the Nature Conservancy, leaving approximately 12 acres completely undeveloped. We have an agreement, the Land Trust and the Ball family have an agreement for the Land Trust to purchase all of the farm with the exception of a approximately 3 acre lot, which will include the existing house. And this subdivision is a necessary step for the completion of that agreement. It's a pretty simple subdivision. It's creating 2 lots. One will have 3 acres, one will have 20 acres, which will include the lots that are already conserved plus the remainder of the property. So we'll have approximately nine and a half acres of completely undeveloped land. Where we have issues, there's no frontage right now. Well, there's about 20 feet of frontage on Mansion Road for the entire property. The driveway runs through there. And our proposal continues that driveway as the sole access road for both of the properties. We don't want to enlarge it. And we don't want to have to create frontage, technical legal frontage for either of the lots because the farmhouse has worked for years without it. The 20-acre lot isn't likely ever to be developed. We would agree that if in the future it was to be developed, you'd have to deal with the frontage issue and come back before you. But right now, the purpose is simply divide out the 3-acre lot and do as little as possible with the land because the idea is to conserve the land and we don't want to do really any construction. We want to, with the exception of one small offshoot from the driveway, which will allow access to the conservation land in the rear without having to go through any wetlands. So I think it's a unified plan. So I guess, Jeff, Jenna, I'm going through one of these for the first time. So got a couple, we'll have to file a zoning application requesting the relief we need under zoning, but file it with you. Is that how we do that?
Asking for relief from the creation of the road.
We're asking basically for zoning relief from the requirement of frontage on both lots. And we're asking planning relief from the creation of the roads.
So you would apply under, technically be under unified development. So you would fill out a zoning application, the planning board application, and apply to the.
And request those 2
Right,
things.
So you submit those, everything to me. This board will review both.
That's what I thought, but I wanted to confirm that.
Unless Karen or Peter tell me I'm incorrect. Because this is new.
No, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's it in a nutshell. If you have any questions, we're happy to address them.
I don't, no, Mary?
No, it looks great. I had just one funny thought that I'd never read on a plan before. In the notes, number 6, general laws forbid removal of the survey markers, or you'll have up to a year in jail.
I guess the surveyors are getting feisty, I think.
No, but otherwise it's great. Looks great.
I think it looks fine.
So it's Karen, I got a couple questions for you.
Oh.
Are you meeting the required setbacks for that new lot? That 50 foot in one corner looked a little close.
No, we're not asking any setback relief at all.
Okay. Okay. And then the other question I had was, I saw that, you've got the existing driveway into the Ball residence and that the idea is to kind of break that off to access the new lot. Are you anticipating the public to be accessing that lot? And if so, are you intending any sort of public street dedication or?
We're not anticipating any public street dedication. We do anticipate in the future trails for pedestrian access by the public. But that little break off is really just so that the Nature Conservancy and the Land Trust can get to the back of their properties without having to go through wetlands.
Got it. Thank you. I think, hold on.
And I think I say, if in the future we were to develop the farm, which is about as likely as spitting in the ocean is to raise the sea level, then we would come back before.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, good. All right. Now, do we set a hearing date for this?
No,
Okay.
No, this is only pre-app.
This
So
is only
they'll,
pre-app. Okay,
yes,
fine.
they will need to
Then,
make application for the variances and modifications that they're requesting and come back.
Okay,
Then you will have a public hearing.
all right. So thank you very much. We will see you when you're ready to come back with the next
I-
time.
I'd like to say it's a project that that all the conservation groups and the Ball family are very excited about.
Yeah.
And it culminates, the Ball started preserving the farm back in 1990. So it's a culmination of a long time mutual work together.
Yeah, I read that in 1989 and another year
I mean,
there.
it was like, the other one was in 2001.
And the other one.
That's great. Well,
Great
thank you
history.
very much. And thank you, Martha. We will see you whenever you're ready for. Okay. Zoning ordinances, defined uses in the list of prohibited uses of the ordinances that does not offer a definition. So you have from yesterday, two sets that were sent here. They're identical, but they're done in two different ways. And so you can use whichever one. And Karen, are you going to walk us through this?
Can hear her.
Karen, I think you're muted. Okay.
My apologies. I know that last time we went through this, it was very dense, and I understood that, and I kind of sensed that. So what I did here is, as what was just described, is I provide you with two different versions. The intent here, and two different versions are exactly the same information. They're just organized in two different ways, so you can rely on either one. The goal here is just to take all of the comments from the last hearing and incorporate them as you've requested. And then I think tonight it probably makes sense just to, go through it to see really if there's any other changes or things that you want me to look at or draft. Most of it is, I think, done at this point, unless, again, there are issues with the particular definitions that we are proposing or the changes that we talked about last time. The only thing that comes to mind in terms of follow-up,
Reading my phone.
I know floating residences or businesses, that was something that we were going to send to the harbor master.
Yeah.
So at some point, we just want to get that feedback. And then I believe the other kind of follow-up item was as to agriculture. And that was, I'm just trying to get to it. That was a concern that during the discussion, it was brought up, like, well, how do we know how to deal with this unless we know the context of other examples where these terms are defined. So you'll see that at page, what am I at? It's 2. And I put page numbers on it because I thought that might be helpful. 6, I believe, that's boats. Yes, so at page 6, where it says livestock or other agricultural purposes, in the comment, there is all the other areas where those terms are used in case you wanted to take a look at that for context. I know there was a discussion too about boat trailers. So boats were added, the word boats was added to include that as a excluded item from the prohibition. So if you're towing a boat on a trailer, that trailer is not prohibited. I think that's all the big stuff, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
Anybody got questions, comments? No. I thought this was very nicely done.
Yeah.
Great town. Can't find my notes here.
It's helpful, Jen.
Yeah.
To have this. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I have kind of a comment here under, it's having to do with number 19, it's car, mopeds, jet skis, and motorized vehicle rentals. It says any motorized vehicle licensed to use on the public highways. Well, a jet ski wouldn't be used on a public highway. So I've always thought that maybe you might want to take that out.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point. The key to that one is that that term motor vehicle is already defined in your general ordinances.
Okay,
So we thought it best to copy the same language, so that you don't have two different definitions. And
okay,
really, that's just to define, motor vehicle.
okay. I just, as you say, if you don't think that's a problem, that's fine with me. But I don't think I want to see any jet skis on the road. That bothered me. And then, under the farming, you would put both of those definitions in, is that what you're saying? For the farming and the agricultural, land, I was a little confused on that.
Yeah, so there, right now, there's no definition for either livestock or agricultural. And what I did was I went through and in the
Okay.
comment to the right, you can, if you have
Yeah,
that.
I saw that. Okay.
It has all of the pertinent, spots. I cut and pasted it from other parts of the ordinance where where the ordinance defines farming, so you can understand how the ordinance talks about farming and agriculture in general.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure that gets included, since it looks like it's needed. Okay, that's all my questions. Anybody else have questions?
Well, thank you for doing this. It's great. But when I was reading, as I was reading number 11 in particular, I love that your name is Peter, by the way. It just made me think, where would a citizen go to, while there isn't an island-wide ban on pesticides or limiting their use, except for on town property. Just when I was reading 11, it made me think, where would a citizen on Block Island go to encourage a ban on the use of pesticides and pre-emergent pesticides?
I thought there was something in the general ordinance.
Is there, I know that it's not used on town,
You have used on
like town recreation properties.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know, Karen just made me think of that when I was reading number 11. But I just run into people who ask me about that, so I'm sort of using the mic to get their word out there, their thoughts, concerns out there.
Mhm.
But
Okay,
it looks great, thank you.
so thank you very much, Karen. Which form are you going to actually submit?
Probably neither, because I've got to, once you folks pass it, approve it, I will put it into a format that I think
Okay.
Millie will prefer.
Okay, that's
that
fine.
we
That's
can
what
get it to
that's
the
what I wanted.
council. Yeah, in a way that they need to see it. So it'll be the same information, but again, it'll just be in a different format.
That's fine. That's kind of what I wanted you to say.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Any other questions before I make a motion? Okay, then I make a motion that the new list of definitions for general prohibitions be submitted to the town council.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Karen. This was an interesting job.
It was interesting, but I'm
Very
glad we got it done.
I learned a few things. Thank you.
Great.
Me too.
All right, the outdoor lighting ordinance that has not been completed, so
Yes, Karen and Peter and I met to review the current draft and the zoning ordinance that pertains to lighting, and we are working on it.
okay, so it's a work in progress. We'll hope to see it next month. Because I'd love to kind of get it approved before the summer population comes in and starts doing things to
Yes.
their property. So that'd be great. And we have 2 sets of minutes. You had a chance to look at them?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mary gave me one correction, so for February, and I corrected that, so you might not have even seen it.
Okay,
Was it the extra and, was it the floating and?
No, it was actually making like clear motion.
Oh.
okay.
I just noticed in February,
Day,
it
Jen.
says also present via Zoom where and land use
That's
attorney on February. Just X out the and.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I saw.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with for February 12th.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. And for making the motion for March 12th, please note that on, I think it's the last page, there will be included a list of properties. It is not in now, but it will be included. So I will make a motion to approve the minutes for March 12th with the addition of the list of properties that HDC is recommending be added to the historic district.
Second.
Okay?
So, this is just to give you a follow-up on that, HDC properties being added to the district. The
Oh, here.
or the HDC commission voted in favor of adding plat 5 lot 90, so we're just revising the maps and the list and getting it together for the,
Good.
But it doesn't have to come back to us.
it doesn't have to come back to you, no.
No,
You
we
left
made
it
our
open.
motion specifically that it would be on the list, providing it was okayed by the historic district. And they okayed. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And I make a motion that the meeting be adjourned.
Yes.
Social seconds with a heartfelt yes.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the motion meeting is adjourned. Thank you guys for coming. I needed every
Thank
single
you.
one of you.